What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Total Takedown for UFC 292. We're not talking about sides. We're not talking about who we think's going to win. We're going overs and we're going unders here on this show. This is Pub Sports Radio. Make sure you smack that like button for me. Let's dig straight on into it. First fight of the night, Silva takes on Morose. Total set at 2.5. The over 2.5 minus 130. The under 2.5 plus 100. And we've been turning these women's MMA totals on their heads for a decent little bit here now. And I kind of like this under 2.5. Silva really has that like one shot, one kill type of submission offense. She needs one takedown and she can wrap pretty much anybody up. However, Morose in this case has the reverse Uno card on her side, and when she fought Silva the first time, she tapped Silva. So we know both women can be finished. Both women obviously have that finishing upside, and Morose has a whole lot more experience than Silva does. I have giant questions about Silva's gas tank. Every single time she wins in like a second round finish, it looks like she's on the verge of death gassing, and then she finds the sub. I don't know if that's going to work on someone like Morose, so I think Silva needs to finish early, and if she doesn't, I kind of have a feeling that Morose pours on the gas, and this thing goes under 2.5. So I like violence in the first fight of the night. Andrea KGB Lee takes on Natalia Silva up next. 2.5 the total. This is more of your classic women's MMA spot. Over 2.5 minus 210. I would lean towards that over. If there's violence in this fight, it's coming from Natalia Silva, and that's pretty much the only one who I think is going to do that. KGB Lee, though, I think we can rely on her toughness, on her durability. She's only been finished one time in her entire professional career, and that was via submission. Silva obviously has sub chops, but she prefers to strike because of that. Unless KGB is shot, unless she's just at the point where she can't take the type of damage she has her entire career before, I think we're going to get a 15-minute kickboxing match. So I think this is going over 2.5. I'm not touching that total, but I would lean to the over 2.5. Andre Petrowski takes on Gerald Meerschaert. 1.5 the total. Over 1.5 minus 130. Under 1.5 plus 100. And you could argue this one either way. You really could. Obviously, both these guys have finishing upside. We've seen Gerald isn't great at taking punches anymore. Andre's got that big power. Both guys have nasty submission games. Both guys have been finished. This is a fight that I do not think is going the distance. However, Andre Petrowski could just sit on the chest of Gerald Meerschaert, use that wrestling in his back pocket, slow down Gerald, and grind out a decision win. Also, Gerald tends to drag his opponents deep. He likes to gas them out, and usually those finishes come in the second and the third rounds when his game plan works. So I do think we'll get up and over 1.5. It's dangerous. This could be your butthole pucker of the week, but I think over 1.5 at minus 130 is probably the move. Brad Katona takes on Cody Gibson, and I don't have a total for you up next here. I also have not looked into Cody Gibson, so sorry, folks, got nothing for you. Austin Hubbard takes on Holobaugh. We've got a 2.5 total, over minus 165, under is plus 130. And I lean over, mostly because that's the way that Austin Hubbard tends to fight his fights. He starts out a little slow, he ramps up the intensity, sometimes he'll get that third round finish, but more often than not, he's a bit of a decisionator. Holobaugh's a guy that, when he gets a step down in competition, we've seen what he can do. He can really kind of let low and be free, and he does have some decent finishing upside, but I think the durability of Hubbard, even if he is on the backslide of this thing, he's going to be able to hang around in this spot. So I do think the over 2.5 is probably the way to look. Next up, you've got Gregory Rodriguez and Dennis Tululin, however, the exact opposite. Total 1.5, under is chalked all the way to minus 195. This one's probably not getting out of a round. So Dennis Tululin has no idea what he's doing on the ground. Not a thing. Like, if this guy gets taken down, he does everything wrong. He doesn't follow the right moves. He gives up bad positions. He's got decent takedown defense, but once he's on the floor, he's got no clue what to do down there. Never taken a jiu-jitsu class in his life. Gregory Rodriguez, on the other hand, this guy on the feet is chinny. He's very, very suspect. His chin got exposed in his last fight, and I've been talking about it for a long time. I didn't think it was going to happen in his last fight, unfortunately, so I missed out on the fade, but he definitely can be finished. On the flip side, very offensively gifted. Obviously, this guy can strike. He's got big power in all of his hands. World-class BJJ. Huge advantage on the ground over Dennis in this spot. Under 1.5. I'm not laying minus 125. I'm minus 195 on it. Sorry about that. But I definitely think this thing looks under. Chris Weidman and Brad Tavares. We've got a 2.5 pick'em price tag. This one's tough. This is kind of the sketchy stay away spot for me for the week, because Chris Weidman, you have no idea what to expect. He's coming back at 39 years old. The one thing he did since he's been back is do a grappling contest where he didn't look very good either. he was kind of shot before he went out on his break with the, oh geez, don't call it that, before he had the time off due to the leg break, unfortunately. I didn't think he looked like himself at that stage of his life. Now coming back from that kind of a horrific injury and trying to regain your fighting form and then be the guy everyone thought you would be at this stage of your career at 39 years old years later, I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, the one thing he's got in his back pocket is world-class wrestling, right? They call this kid the All-American for a reason. I think he can obviously get takedowns on Brad Tavares, grind the time off the clock, but he also doesn't have the greatest gas tank, or at least he didn't the last time we saw him, and I've got a hard time believing he's been on the treadmill this entire time with that leg. So I don't know if he's got gas for 15 straight minutes. And Brad Tavares is a guy who's normally a decisionator. This fight screams over 2.5 no matter what happens. But Brad got put down and finished in his last fight. And he's also been hitting people a whole lot harder. It seems like he's sitting down on his punches a little bit more these days. I think we could see a finish in this spot. I really don't want to play this total. I'm going to lean with the under 2.5, but there's so many questions. I think there's better spots. I'm going to keep my money in my pockets. Marlon Vera takes on Pedro Munhoz in the next fight. 2.5 the total. Over is minus 330. Under is plus 240. And here's the thing. I actually think this fight's going to finish. The problem for me is it's only coming from one side. Pedro Munhoz is not finishing Marlon Vera. Nobody's finishing Marlon Vera. And even though the same can be said for Pedro, their durability is unquestionable. I am questioning the durability of Pedro Munhoz. In his last couple of fights, he's been clipped. He's been rocked. He's been wobbled. Yes, he's been coming back from it, but he's facing a different caliber of offensive fighter in this one. He's facing somebody who's not going to go away. He's facing someone who's not going to get out from under his face. Like, he's going to constantly be walking forward. He's not going to respect Pedro Munhoz striking whatsoever, and he's going to lay the hammer on this man. When Marlon Vera has a sitting duck target, he destroys them. I don't think Pedro Munhoz can take a 15-minute prolonged beating from Vera. So whether he actually gets cleanly knocked out, whether he gets club and subbed, or whether the referee steps in and saves him from himself, I do think at some point Vera's going to find a finish in this fight. The thing is, you can get a much better price than the under 2.5. Under 2.5 is plus 240. I really don't see a way Pedro Munhoz finishes Marlon Vera unless we get another like awkward leg break type of situation where it's a fluke accident, and that just doesn't happen to Vera. The dude's made out of iron. So I'm going to say under, but there's a better way to play that. You can get a better number just by taking Vera inside the distance. I know, it's the total show, but I'm telling you guys what I think. Next up, Blackshear takes on Mario Bautista. Again, it's a little too early. We don't have a total just yet. I would expect probably a 2.5 here on this one. I know Blackshear's coming off that early twister in his last fight. However, he's been kind of a decisionator grappler. That submission upside is definitely something that you've got to watch out for. Bautista, very well-rounded, good grappler himself. He's been sinking in a whole lot of submissions recently, but against bottom-tier guys. I think there's a chance that Blackshear can pull the upset in this fight, and I think there's a chance that Bautista might not be able to handle the size and pressure and pace of someone like Blackshear grinding on him 24/7, but I also think these guys are probably going to go a full 15. I think this is going to be a competitive fight where Bautista is not quite ready for what Blackshear is bringing to the table, and even if he does get that win, Blackshear is going to prove that he belongs on this level. So I think we'll see an over in this spot. I'll be curious what that number looks like. Neil Magny takes on Ian Garry. 2.5 the total here. Under 2.5 minus 130. Over 2.5 plus 100 even money. I like under. I like under a lot. I do also think that Ian Garry is the underside. Now, you can get Ian Garry inside the distance at like minus 135. The under 2.5 is minus 130. It's a cheaper price tag to go ahead and include Neil Magny in there. If Neil happens to get Garry down to the ground, pound him out, submit him something, he's not quite ready for this level. Those are all absolutely on the table in this spot, but I really think that Ian Garry is going to finish Neil Magny. He's got that size, he's got that frame. It's rare that someone at this weight class is bigger, taller, longer than Neil Magny, and Ian Garry is that. He can actually match this guy's height attribute, which is very rare. He's extremely fast, he hits hard, and we know Neil Magny gives up the sub. I have a hard time seeing Neil Magny not get finished in this fight, and if he doesn't get finished, I think it's going to be like a barely surviving, hanging on, clinch pushing up against the cage. I don't think he's finishing Ian Garry, so again, it's a weird one. I gotta say under because I do think this fight is going to end, and actually this time you're getting a break on the price tag, so why not? Under 2.5 minus 130. That bit us last time, though, when we took Amarim inside the distance. God, please don't do that again. She finished in the last 2.5 minutes of the fight, and we ended up missing on the total because the inside the distance cashed instead. Hate when that happens. Zhang Weili takes on Amanda Lemos in this next spot here. 3.5 is the total. Over 3.5 is plus 154. Under 3.5 is minus 200. I do think we see violence in this fight, but you're not going to catch me laying minus 200 on an under 3.5. Maybe I'll parlay up fight doesn't go the distance or something like that. I'd be tempted on playing an under 2.5 instead. I don't know how quickly these women are going to come out. That's kind of the thing. We know Zhang is incredibly aggressive. We know Lemos does the same. Zhang obviously has a big grappling advantage here in this spot, and I just think this comes down to how quickly one of these women burns out. Because if Lemos comes out and tires, I think Zhang's going to school her on the ground. And by the way, they did the ceremonial, not the ceremonial, sorry, they did the presser. And actually, it turns out Zhang is a decent bit larger than Lemos. I don't know if that was just the shoes she was wearing. I can't wait to see at tomorrow's weigh-ins whether or not she's actually the larger fighter or not. But she seems to have a little bit of a size advantage, which caught me off guard. I thought Lemos was going to be the one with the size advantage. And if Zhang's got the size advantage, I think Lemos is going for a ride here. This thing's going under. Aljamain Sterling takes on Sean O'Malley in your main event. 3.5 the total. It was 4.5 earlier. It looks like they've been getting absolutely smashed on this under. Violence is the key. Under 3.5, minus 145. If Aljamain Sterling wins this fight, it's going over and it's sailing over, right? Like, I mean, okay, that's not entirely fair. Aljamain Sterling does have a slick submission grappling game, obviously. Sean O'Malley actually is better on the ground than I think people give him credit for, but Aljamain Sterling's on a different level. Aljo's ground and pound. It's solid. It's good. I'm not counting out the fact that he could potentially TKO a tired out, worn out Sugar Sean O'Malley. But if O'Malley is getting the win, it's more than likely a finish as well. I could see him biding his time, minding the range, trying to drag this thing late, and then, like, if he gets backpacked, maybe just surviving in that position and keeping things going here until we get to the judges' scorecards. I think that's a hard sell, though. It's possible, but I think it's a hard sell. I do like the under in this fight. I like the under 4.5 a whole lot better than I like the under 3.5. But you know what? If you want to get funky, maybe parlay fight doesn't go the distance in the main event and in the co-main event. Rather than playing the totals and the numbers, you can just say we're going to go ahead and see violence in both fights and get about minus 120 on that. I actually like that a little bit better than playing under 3.5s because we know historically 3.5s tend to go over. So maybe just a fun little way to play it there for you. You get some violence in your main and co-mains because I do think both of them end up finishing. That's the total takedown, folks. We'll see you tomorrow for the undefeated post-weigh-in show and everybody's favorite, the Sharp Action Report. Hit the like button. We'll see you tomorrow. Let's roll.